You disappear, and instantly their world glitches. For the first time, the person who fed their ego is gone. No warning, no explanation, just silence. And that silence hits them like a shutdown they never programmed for. Because when you walk away without noise, without drama, without begging, something happens inside them that they never want anyone to see. I'm going to reveal all 10 of those reactions, and the final one is the one they fear the most. First, they feel a violent loss of control. Narcissists function like systems that need constant input, and you were a major input. When that input disappears, their ego starts glitching. Then comes confusion, because your silence is unhackable. They can't decode it, can't manipulate it, can't twist it. Next is panic, because now they need you more than you ever needed them. Then comes the rage spike. The moment they realize they can't trigger you anymore, they burn inside trying to figure out how to pull you back. And just when they think they can let it go, their mind loops. They replay every interaction, every message, searching for the moment they lost control. Your absence becomes their obsession. Your silence becomes their mirror. And the reflection terrifies them because for the first time, they see their weakness. When their illusion of control collapses, it doesn't happen gradually. It breaks in an instant. The moment they realize you are no longer responding to their cues, their emotional traps, or their predictable cycles of praise and punishment. Narcissists build an internal system where every person around them is a piece of machinery meant to serve a function, and your function was to validate them, react to them, and feed their sense of superiority. When you silently disappear, that internal system malfunctions. They are not just confused, they are destabilized. Their mind expects you to orbit around them, and suddenly your orbit stops, as if gravity itself has been rewritten. This collapse feels like losing a source of power, one they believed they owned by default. They begin questioning how they lost grip, but instead of questioning their behavior, they question your loyalty, your motives, your audacity to detach yourself from their control. It offends their ego on a structural level. They feel threatened because control is their oxygen, and your absence becomes a suffocating vacuum. They sense a power shift happening in real time, but they cannot stop it. That loss becomes the first crack in their self-created throne, and it terrifies them because it proves something they will never admit. They never had real control over you at all. When their ego panics because they can't read your emotions, it hits them at a level deeper than simple confusion. Narcissists rely on constant emotional data from you. Your reactions, your tone, your frustration, your affection, even your silence when it's directed at them purposely. These emotional signals help them map out how to manipulate you next, how to provoke you, or how to pull you back under their influence. But when you vanish without explanation, you cut off their emotional radar completely. They can't track your thoughts, your feelings, your intentions, or your next move. That lack of access sends their ego into a chaotic scramble. They feel exposed, as if someone turned off the lights in a room they depend on to navigate. Your silence becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability is their greatest fear because it removes their strategic advantage. They start wondering if you are angry, indifferent, healing, or worse, moving on. That uncertainty slices directly into their ego because they can't shape your emotions if they can't see them. They panic not out of love, but out of losing their psychological grip. Their mind races with questions, each one louder than the last, because if they can't read you, they can't control you. And if they can't control you, their entire identity structure begins to feel unstable. When they feel abandoned and rapidly switch to anger, it happens in a way that looks almost mechanical, like a system defaulting into emergency mode. Narcissists interpret your disappearance not as a boundary or a healthy detachment, but as a personal attack on their worth and dominance. The moment they sense abandonment, their mind doesn't process sadness or accountability the way a healthy person might. Instead, it jumps straight into defensive rage. This anger isn't random. It's a shield that protects their fragile ego from the unbearable thought that someone could choose to walk away from them. Their inner narrative shifts instantly from, I control this person, to how dare they leave me. And that shift ignites a deep internal hostility. The anger gives them a temporary illusion that they are still powerful, that they don't care, that they are the one rejecting you in their mind, even though you're the one who stepped away. They may fantasize about punishing you, replacing you, or proving that you were never important. But underneath that surge of hostility is fear. Fear that they were never as irresistible as they believed. Fear that their supply is slipping away, and fear that you might be discovering a life where they are irrelevant. Their anger is loud, but it exists only to drown out the quiet truth that your absence exposes their deepest insecurity. When they start obsessing over why you disappeared, the shift inside them is immediate and overwhelming. Narcissists aren't used to unanswered questions, especially ones that threaten their sense of superiority. Your silence becomes an unsolvable equation, and because they believe every person in their orbit should remain predictable, your sudden unpredictability becomes a mental infection they can't shake. They replay the timeline in their head, trying to identify the exact moment they lost access to your reactions, your attention, your energy. Instead of reflecting on their own behavior, they fixate on what you must be thinking, what you might be planning, and whether someone else has entered your life. This obsession is not rooted in care. It's rooted in the terror of losing influence. They start scrolling through old messages, checking your online activity, imagining scenarios that either inflate their ego or stab it. One moment they convince themselves you're still emotionally tied to them, and the next they panic at the idea that you may have detached completely. This mental looping becomes a private torment because they can't ask you what happened without admitting they lost control. The lack of closure frustrates them, but the lack of access consumes them. In a world where they expect to be the center of attention, your silence becomes the one thing powerful enough to dominate their thoughts. When they fear losing supply more than losing you, the reaction inside them is both revealing and disturbing. Narcissists don't bond the way healthy people do. They bond through utility. To them, you weren't just a partner, friend, or connection. You were a resource that fed their ego, validated their existence, and stabilized their identity. When you disappear, they don't fear the emotional loss the way you might expect. What terrifies them is the collapse of the psychological supply chain you unknowingly provided. Your attention, your reactions, your admiration, even your anger were forms of fuel. Without that fuel, they feel a sudden internal emptiness, a hollow drop in their sense of importance. This fear grows quickly because they don't have a stable internal sense of self. They rely on external validation to confirm who they are. So your absence doesn't just inconvenience them, it destabilizes them. They start wondering who will admire them now, who they can impress, who will respond to their drama, who will give them the emotional energy they drained from you. It's not you they're afraid of losing, it's what you represented. And deep down, they know replacing the exact type of supply you gave them won't be easy, because every person they extract value from plays a specific psychological role. Losing your role creates a gap they don't know how to fill, and that gap feels like a threat to their entire ego structure. When they feel an urgent need to regain power, it hits them like an internal alarm system going off. The moment you disappear, their mind scrambles to restore the hierarchy they believe they control. Narcissists operate on a constant need to stay above you emotionally, psychologically, and energetically. Your silence flips that dynamic. Suddenly, they are the one left waiting, wondering, reacting. That reversal threatens their entire identity structure, so their instinct is to reestablish dominance as fast as possible. They may try reaching out with fake kindness, dramatic apologies, or nostalgic messages designed to hook you emotionally. If that doesn't work, they switch tactics, provoking you with passive-aggressive comments, posting things online meant to trigger jealousy, or involving mutual connections to pull a response from you. These attempts aren't expressions of care. They're strategic efforts to regain leverage. They need to know they can still influence your emotions, because influence equals dominance in their world. The urgency comes from panic, not love. Your absence exposes air weakness, so regaining power becomes a survival move for their ego. They can't tolerate the idea that you might be unaffected, healing, or moving forward without them. In their mind, pulling you back isn't about reconnecting. It's about restoring the hierarchy where they stand above you and you react below them. Your silence breaks that system, and their rush to regain power is a desperate attempt to rebuild it before it collapses completely. When they experience identity instability without your attention, it feels as if the ground beneath them is dissolving. Narcissists construct their sense of self almost entirely around how others perceive and respond to them. Your presence, your reactions, even your frustrations acted as a mirror reflecting back their importance, superiority, and control. When you disappear, that mirror shatters, leaving them confronted with a raw, unfiltered version of themselves, one they are terrified to face. Suddenly, the carefully curated persona they projected feels hollow and unsustainable. Their confidence wavers because it was never truly theirs. It was borrowed from your validation and the attention of others. Without it, they feel invisible, irrelevant, and destabilized. This triggers a cascade of insecurity that can manifest as obsessive thoughts, frantic attempts to reclaim attention, or even projecting blame onto you to avoid facing the emptiness within. They scramble to recreate the sense of identity they had while you were present, but nothing feels real or sufficient. Every previous strategy that kept them in control fails because your absence exposes the fragility of their constructed self. This identity instability is not just discomfort, it's panic at a fundamental level. They realize their ego is not independent, that it depends entirely on the reactions, focus, and energy of others. And your disappearance proves that the power they thought was inherent was always borrowed and conditional. When they enter a silent scramble to replace you but fail internally, it's a moment that exposes the limits of their control. Narcissists, accustomed to extracting validation and emotional fuel from those around them, instinctively try to replace the source that has vanished. They may seek someone new to fill the role you once played, whether it's attention, admiration or emotional engagement, thinking that a quick substitution will restore equilibrium. But internally, they feel the sting of failure. No one can replicate the exact combination of influence, connection, and supply you provided, and that realization gnaws at them. Their attempts feel hollow because the replacement cannot produce the same effect on their ego. The void you left is unique and irreplaceable. While externally they may act as though they are thriving, inside they wrestle with frustration, insecurity, and the terrifying awareness that they are not indispensable in the lives of others in the way they believed. Their scramble exposes a dependency they never admit to, and the failure reinforces the fragile foundation of their sense of self. Even as they spin strategies, manipulate, or try to regain control elsewhere, the internal acknowledgement persists. Your absence cannot simply be filled or erased. This silent failure becomes a quiet torment, a proof that their world is not as stable or controllable as they always claimed, leaving them exposed and unsettled in ways they rarely show to anyone. In the end, when you simply disappear, you do far more than step away. You expose the fragile architecture of a narcissist's world. Every reaction they have, from panic to rage to obsession, reveals just how dependent their identity, ego, and sense of control are on the presence of others. Your silence becomes a mirror reflecting their vulnerabilities, a silent force that they cannot manipulate or contain. They scramble, they rage, they obsess, but nothing can replace the power you reclaim by simply removing yourself. And that is the ultimate truth. Stepping away doesn't just protect your peace, it shifts the balance entirely, proving that the most powerful tool against manipulation is often invisibility, calm detachment, and refusal to be a source of their fuel. When you disappear, you don't just leave. They confront the reality they've long ignored. Without you, their empire of control is fragile, hollow, and ultimately powerless.